So in Ferguson, every night kind of unfolded differently while we were there. The first night of the curfew, where we went out to report live, the police had begun shutting down streets. So all the access roads to West Florissant, the sort of main street where the confrontations were happening, it was hard to get to, and we were a little late on the uptake. And our hotel was a little bit too far. So anyway, we were finding creative ways to get into that area so that we could report alongside the people who were going to be experiencing whatever happened that night. And in the course of getting there in two cars, our team was split in two, and we wound up on either side of the police line. So the person who we were with, who actually knew how to use the live stream box, who was Tim Poole, he was on the other side, and I was inside with all of this wonderful technology that I hadn't learned how to use yet. I know how to use it now, but I was on the phone and with our live stream producer back in New York saying, Nate, I need to figure this out. There's an APC charging down the road at us right now. We need to go live. We need to go live. How do I do it? And he was very calmly saying, Claire, okay, press this button, put in this passcode. And then, you know, I was sweating. I was holding a tear gas mask, and I'd never used it before, which I later learned that because I didn't know how to use it, wasn't very useful. And then his calm voice through the phone as I'm tinkering with it suddenly says, okay, and we're live. And I pick up the camera and I look up, and the first thing I see is this APC charging down the street, people running away from it, and they're just firing tear gas. And that's my first live shot, is like tear gas coming at the camera. And then suddenly I'm consumed in the cloud of tear gas, and you're choking on the camera, or like in the audio, you can hear our reporter and myself sort of reacting to what's going on. And I think that was probably the biggest surprise moment for me, was trying to harness the technology under pressure like that. But that's part of the job. And now I'll never be in that situation again now that I know how to use it.
I can remember maybe a week and a half in when the police started cordoning off the media. And they put us at the far end of Florissant Avenue in a parking lot. You couldn't go past, but everything was happening far away, and it was very intentional what they were doing. And there were moments when people were pleading, like, media, stay, please stay. Because the idea, and this is what's amazing about social media and all these cameras on our phones, everything is captured. There's so many incidents that 10 years ago we would have never seen.
It's true.
We would have never seen all these beatings of black people, all these shootings that are now captured on video. But I've been in situations where you're at a crime scene, you're in some sort of wild situation, and the last person they want to see is you with a camera, or you asking your questions, or you in your little silly notepad when there is a body laying in the street. That's the last moment they want to speak to you. But that moment where they're saying, please bear witness to this, because we've been dealing with this for a long time. Please keep filming. And I think that was a very interesting moment that people are pleading with you. And then when you stay, they're applauding. Now, I did get to a point where it was silly almost, where I mentioned on the panel where you would see the police switch their tactic from just shooting rubber bullets and tear gassing people to going into a crowd and extracting individual by individual, for better and worse. But then as you see this swarm of officers chasing down people, all you saw is these cameras bobbing behind them. And it was like, my goodness, where they're arresting someone and everyone is pushing each other to get a picture of it. And that was kind of like, wow. At what point
how did you interpret that? What did you think that meant?
It felt like a feeding frenzy. It felt out of control. It felt like it was for the sake of these dramatic moments, because it had been 2 weeks and we've been doing nothing but showing these images. And again, as a print reporter who also just speaks about the analysis of it on TV, I feel like my role is to observe and talk to people and contextualize. It's not just about the picture. It's not just about the camera. So when I saw that and realizing that, Twitter is exploding, the internet is breaking, viewers, everyone's crowding around the television sets watching this, at what point are we exploiting this? At what point are we inciting? And I don't know if we are or we're not. But the idea that you have a swarm of cameras waiting for every moment. People are getting, hit. I saw one guy get hit in the face with a butt of a rifle before he's being arrested, dragged out. Some people getting the wrong people. And here we are crowding around to get this picture that are going to make for wonderful images. Because when we see the TV and the guy throwing back the tear gas, it's going to be amazing images. But at what point are we contributing? If our goal is to, again, peel back the layers and give the people, here's what's happening on the ground, at what point are we doing that, without artificially enhancing it? Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I don't know. It was just sitting back and watching it. Mm-hmm. I had never seen anything like that before. Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing as the story. We say this a lot. Don't become the story. how do you break down decades of racial tension between thousands of people and all types of systemic issues through education, through policing, through law enforcement? How do you break that down into the story? There are tons of stories. One of those stories was the way police were behaving and the way police were dealing with journalists. And so when journalists are stopped from being able to do their job, when journalists are having their rights violated and are being, frankly, assaulted by police officers, that is a story. And any journalist who doesn't think that's a story, frankly, is just jealous that no one's talking about them. And so I think that is kind of a long-winded answer to that, but I just think that it's really important. No one in Ferguson, the people, the underrepresented people, the people who were crying out for media attention, none of them were upset with us because they said, now you know what we go through every day. And in some ways that makes it easier to tell their story or enables us to tell their story better.
When I copyright something with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and my name on it, it's also, to me, a stamp of authenticity that, this is something that's real. And that I'm holding this out as journalism that should be trusted. Because there was a lot of pictures and tweets and things that were spread that weren't true. I mean, there's a picture of people put around of who people said was Darren Wilson with a big black eye, and that's been found out that that's not Darren Wilson and stuff. So. I do it for a couple of reasons. A, so that people can't just take our content that we're producing, and B, as a verification of that this is real and this is legitimate, and you should trust this.
No, the idea of who we decide to interview, and you talk about that balance, where it was important for people to, for the first time, to really hear from law enforcement and be able to have that open, honest dialogue. I think sometimes we were trained as journalists to where fair and balance meant just equal time, sometimes for equal time's sake. And sometimes I take the vantage point of being a grasshopper on a boulder watching the buffalo run by. This is what's fair about this is my vantage point, and here's what we're seeing. And so a lot of times I didn't feel the need necessarily to add a law enforcement voice. Now we can always have the law enforcement perspective, especially when we peel back and say, police say that Brown was shot and killed after a confrontation in which the officer said he reached for his gun. But a slew of witnesses, number 6, 7, 8 witnesses say that this is what happened. And so as we're on that street and we're watching people run past a beauty town or smash into a liquor store or are sobbing and throwing up and vomiting and they're wiping the tear gas from their eyes, that's the story we're telling. That's the vantage point from that rock as the grasshopper watching all this happen. And so I think now we're in a place where I think we are, our news consumers are sophisticated enough to understand, that, for example, I work for MSNBC. Most of our viewers are progressive. They care about progressive ideals. They care about death penalty stuff and gun laws and all these things. So the way they're receiving this information, they want to see, show me what's happening to this community that is most affected by all of these different ills. How are they responding to this? How are they impacted by this? And of course, as journalists, we'll construct our stories around the core truth and all the voices. But I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I don't think I answered it the first time.
Well, I think it's really important that, obviously everyone doesn't have to do every job, but I do think it's important that we not just play to our core audience, because if that were the case, the fact is, this is a very niche-oriented world, and the media is very polarized and very segmented. And I just think that our job is to continue to cover the waterfront. And while I don't think everybody needs to do every job, somebody needs to do every job.
Did you learn anything new about?
Well, not to sound like an old fart, but I've been doing this a long time. Part of the reason, I think a lot of us got into the business is that we didn't see other people like ourselves in the business. And I'm still part of that generation. And it's a lesson that continues to need to be learned, is that you have to continue to ask who's missing and look for that voice. But it just has to be said that sometimes that voice that's missing is the voice of official authority. Because sometimes that voice of official authority is not making itself available to be heard by the people who are the objects of that authority, right? And I think that while a lot of people, I feel correctly, don't feel, all news can't be like official pronouncements. I think sometimes that, we forget that part of our job is to hold authority accountable. And one way to hold authority accountable is continue to ask them to be and to demand that they be accountable to the people that they serve. And I don't think that point can't be lost. It can't be lost. But my attitude is look for who's missing, always. And sometimes the voice that's missing is not the voice that you think, that you initially came to find. I think that's just generally good advice for any journalist.
I'd like to add this. When I started journalism school, I went with the intentions of I'm going to be a TV news anchor woman and be at a desk. And this situation in Ferguson has completely swayed my thoughts on that. Simply because when I go to these press meetings, I did see nasty national cameramen. Just, it ruined me. To me, these media people were my heroes, and I always idolized them. And then to see them act the way they did, it ruined me. So I seen how Wesley and Ryan were writing, and I said, hey, online news, you have so much freedom with it. And yes, you're pressed to get it out, but you can really focus on someone's story and really tell all aspects of it. You don't have that 3-minute package video that you have to shoot. So I have a brand new appreciation for online news. If it wasn't for Twitter, I wouldn't even be here at this conference or on that panel, because Twitter was when I seen the Beacon Reader tweet that said, hey, we're looking for freelancers out on the ground in Ferguson. I applied to it. I got hired right away. And from there, the rest is history. But yeah, so much respect for online news. I'm just so thankful for it.